Liquid organic fertilizers are best for watering young plants and also plants that are in containers like the ones you see behind me in my greenhouse. In this video, I'll show you what type of liquid organic fertilizers I actually use and how to mix and apply them. Welcome to Healthy Fresh Homegrown, the YouTube channel for families who are wanting a more thriving, healthier lifestyle by growing food at home. So, liquid fertilizers. Which ones do I use? Lots of different types, and at times it might be a little bit overwhelming to choose which one to use. But living here on the West Coast, I've got the ocean close by, and so the two fertilizers that I use are actually coming from the ocean. On my plants, I use both fish fertilizer and a seaweed fertilizer. So first off, fish fertilizer. This happens to be the brand that I use. It's called West Coast Fish Fertilizer. It's coming from Alaska. But of course, if you can't find it locally, you can always get it online, and I'll throw some links down below in the video description of good ones that you can purchase. Fish fertilizer is actually great for plants such as tomatoes, which I have right here in my greenhouse and elsewhere in my garden. And despite some of the myths around using fish fertilizer on plants, no, it doesn't make your tomatoes taste like fish unless you over apply it. The one caution though is that it smells. So what you want to make sure you don't do is use it indoors on any houseplants, otherwise you may find yourself and your plants sleeping outdoors for a few nights. So the other thing to keep in mind is that if you're using it in an enclosed space like a greenhouse, you are going to have a bit of a smell for a couple of days after you apply it. So you might have to go into your greenhouse prepared. And yes, there are some low odor versions, but to be honest with you, they're not that low odor. You might also want to be careful about applying it outdoors, especially if you have very picky neighbors. Your neighbors might complain. However, usually outdoors in the fresh air, it will usually dissipate after maybe a few hours or maybe half a day. So the other emulsion that I use is actually a seaweed fertilizer. So this one comes from the ocean as well. Now this one doesn't smell as much and is a little bit less overpowering, so sometimes I will dilute it and use it in my house, on my house plants. In the greenhouse, it doesn't smell as badly, and it usually goes away after just maybe a day or so. One good thing about seaweed fertilizer is that there's lots of minerals in the seaweed fertilizer, so it's actually great for things such as greens. So your lettuces, mustards, things like Swiss chard really benefit from getting seaweed fertilizer, especially when you're transplanting them and they're young. Okay, so let's talk about mixing this stuff. So best thing to do is follow the directions. Some of the emulsions might be a little bit stronger than others or weaker than others, so what you want to do is follow the instructions, measure out how much liquid and how much water you need to dilute it with, so that you're not over fertilizing your plants or under fertilizing them. Sometimes I will make the emulsion a little bit weaker for really tender young plants because they don't need as much fertilizer at one time. Usually I just do it the strength that the directions say. So best to mix it in a watering can, and barring a watering can, you can always use a pail or something else and then scoop it out with a cup to water your plants that way. Use a medicine cup. In this case, I've got a medicine cup here that is 30 milliliters or about 2 tablespoons. So all you need to do is grab your liquid, one tip, shake it really well. This stuff tends to settle, not so much the seaweed, but definitely the fish fertilizer. So once you've got it shaken up, then measure out your fertilizer carefully. Especially the fish fertilizer, you definitely don't want to make a mess with it, because it's smelly. So I'm going to put 2 in this one. There we go. Cap it so you don't make a mess in case you knock it over. And what I usually actually do is I'll actually 1 cup of the seaweed and 1 cup of the fish. However, because I'm doing this quite often, I've actually mixed seaweed and fish together 50-50, so 1 to 1 in a spare jug that I had, and so that way I don't need to measure out the individual jugs. I just need to grab 2 medicine cups of this. And then what we'll do is we'll add water. So if you have rainwater available, that's actually the best to use. But I've run out of rainwater because it's a bit of a drought right now, so I'm just using tap water. You can also use tap water, let it stand for a little while, and then actually mix it with your fertilizer. Then it's just really a matter of just watering your plants. As you normally would. Give them all that good food. And they get watered at the same time. So I usually will do that every 2, maybe to 3 weeks, depending on how the plants are growing. And I do that instead of the usual watering that I might do every day or every 2 days. As I mentioned, I will also, of course, water plants when I transplant them, when I grow them from seed in the greenhouse, and then when I transplant them into the garden, I'll give them a shot of the liquid seaweed and sometimes also the fish fertilizer. So it's that easy. One method that I didn't mention is foliar feeding, and you can do that as well with the liquid fertilizers. Now I'll do a separate video on that because it does require a different method with regards not to mixing but to applying it, so I'll show you how to do that in a bit of a shorter video. Now this fertilizer can be a bit expensive. The seaweed and the fish fertilizer, right now they're running about $70 a bottle, and that's Canadian. So that is a bit pricey, but keep in mind that a bottle of this will actually last you all season and even 2 seasons if you just have a few containers. So a little does go a long way since you do dilute it with water. Now the other fertilizer that I haven't mentioned in this video is granular organic fertilizer, and got some right here. So this is a granular organic fertilizer, and it's used a little bit differently, and it has a bit of a different effect on your plants. So I'll be doing a video on that next week. So be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon so that you'll be notified when that video comes out. So thank you for watching. Good luck with your plants, and we'll see you next week.